Chancellor, as always in these situations, is there anything you need to tell us about the safety of British citizens in the war zone, whether that's in Israel or Iran or in the region generally?
The Prime Minister announced last night that we are sending assets, including jets, to the Middle East to ensure that our assets and our people in the region are protected, and also to support our allies. Obviously, it's incredibly concerning about what's happening in the Middle East for people who are there, but also because of the global ramifications potentially. And that's why the Prime Minister and our allies are urging for de-escalation. That is what is really critical right now. Calm heads and a de-escalation of the conflict. And the Prime Minister is now at the G7 summit in Canada with our key allies around the world, and this will be front and centre of those discussions.
When you say we've put assets into the area, does that mean that we're at war?
No, it does not mean that we are at war, and we have not been involved in these strikes or this conflict. But we do have important assets in the region, and it is right that we send jets to protect them, and that's what we've done. It's a precautionary move, and at the same time we are urging de-escalation. The Prime Minister has spoken to the Prime Minister of Israel. Our Foreign Secretary David Lammy has spoken to his Iranian counterparts, and we've been very busy these last 48 hours or so urging restraint, and that's what the Prime Minister will be doing in Canada this week.
We are allies of the Israelis. If they were to ask us to deploy our assets in support of their operations, would we?
Well, as I said, we haven't been involved, and I'm not going to get involved in sort of operational decisions for the future. This is a fast-moving situation. Israel has every right to defend itself. We also are very concerned about Iran's nuclear deterrent.
What's the point of being an ally if you don't come to your allies' aid when they ask?
Well, the US have also been clear they haven't been involved in these strikes to date. We have in the past supported Israel when there have been missiles coming in. I'm not going to comment on what might happen in the future, but so far we haven't been involved, and we're sending in assets to both protect ourselves and also potentially to support our allies.
Well, exactly. But as a point of principle, and I understand you don't want to talk about anything operational, we can't predict what's going to happen in the future. But as a point of principle, we are allies to the Israelis, and there could be a situation here where we are asked to deploy assets in their support, and we would have to consider that, wouldn't we?
Well, what we've done in the past, as you know, Trevor, is help protect Israel from incoming strikes, so a defensive activity.
So I'm just simply saying...
I'm not going to rule anything out at this stage, Trevor. It's a fast-moving situation, a very volatile situation, but we don't want to see escalation. We want to see de-escalation because it's a very volatile part of the world, and of course what happens in the Middle East, as we know, often has repercussions around the world. We've already seen in the last few days, for example, oil and gas prices begin to go up. That has consequences for people here in the UK, and so we do have an interest in de-escalation in the region, and that is what we are urging.
You, of course, have to think about the economic consequences of all of this. What happens if they close the Straits of Hormuz, which is one of the most important passages for commercial traffic in the world, and on which much of what we buy in the shops and so on depends?
Mm-hmm. So there are two sort of immediate concerns. The first is around oil and gas prices, and over the course of this week, oil prices have gone up by just over 10%. They're still down compared to a few months ago, but of course, we're keeping an eye on that. And at the same time, as you say, trade routes are very important through the Middle East, and we've seen disruption there in the past, partly because of the Houthi attacks, for example, and so that is a cause for concern. But one of the reasons why...
How worried are you about all of that?
Well, look, it's very early days and things are moving quickly, but when we urge for de-escalation in the region, that is in part because of the lives at risk, and we saw therefore more loss of life overnight, but also because that what happens in the Middle East affects us here at home. And it's why in the spending review this week, we invested heavily in our defence to keep our country safe and protect ourselves and our allies. And it's also why in the spending review this week, we increased investment in our energy security, because we are very dependent on imports of energy. And what we did this week was invest in Sizewell C, in small modular reactors, and also in renewable energy in the UK. Let me just finish this point.
Yeah.
Energy security is national security. The previous government left us exposed to global events in energy markets. We are trying to become more resilient, more self-sufficient in energy.
I want to come to the spending review, but just one final thing on the issue of Iran and Israel. The Israelis have made it pretty clear that part of what they want is regime change in Tehran. Do we support that?
Well, I've got no time for the Iranian regime, for the repression of their own people. And we have serious concerns, which we've expressed on a number of occasions, about the Iranian nuclear programme. But we want to see de-escalation at the moment. We are not trying to ramp up the rhetoric. We are very concerned about the developments in the Middle East because of the implications here at home, but also the implications for the Middle East.
All right. Last night, Prime Minister said that there would be a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. It's going to focus on the race of the perpetrators. When do you expect that to start?
There will be the publication of the Casey review this week, and as the Prime Minister said yesterday, we want to get going with that as quickly as possible. Now, in the last year, since we came to office, when we came to office, there were over 200 outstanding recommendations from the J review, which was a national inquiry which took 7 years. The previous government had not been implementing those. We've been cracking on and implementing those.
Yeah,
convictions are now at a record high, and the Prime Minister asked Louise Casey to do a rapid review to see what else we could do. She has said to make sure that these local inquiries that are up and running work properly, that we have a national inquiry alongside that, and we are accepting all of Louise Casey's recommendations, including that one.
Prime Minister says he's read Louise's report from cover to cover, read every word of it, and that has apparently changed his mind. What is in her report that we did not know before that justifies a change of heart?
Well, we'll see the report this week. I haven't yet had a copy of the report. Well, look, we'll see the report this week, but the Prime Minister is saying, even ahead of that he will accept all of her recommendations, including the need for a national inquiry to sit alongside those local inquiries that are already ready. But let me just say this, Trevor, because with local inquiries, they don't have the statutory powers, and we need to make sure that people are compelled to give evidence. That's one of the reasons, because people are not coming forward to give that evidence.
But he, the Home Secretary, Safeguarding Minister, were all pretty clear and specific that they did not think such an inquiry was needed. So they must have been wrong, or they have found out something they did not know before. Which is it?
Well, Louise Casey, when she started this review for the Prime Minister, said herself that she didn't think there was a need for a national inquiry. She has left no stone unturned in her rapid review, and she has now changed her mind and believes that there should be a national inquiry. And the Prime Minister has got huge respect for Louise Casey, has followed her recommendations, and there will be that national inquiry. But that's going to be published this week, and the Home Secretary will speak to it.
So when it's published, will there be some sort of apology to all of those who were criticised by ministers as talking total nonsense, I'm quoting here, and misinformation, and those who were more or less accused of racism for raising this issue?
The most important thing is getting justice.
Well, no, this is what I've asked you is the most important thing.
Well, no, Trevor.
For many people who were criticised in that way.
Trevor, what is the most important thing?
Of course, it's the position of the victims. I understand that.
It is the victims, and it's not people's hurt feelings about how they've been spoken about. The most important here is the victims of these evil crimes.
But the reason it matters is because those people who raise this issue on behalf of victims who cannot often speak for themselves were accused by government ministers of, quote, total nonsense, misinformation and racism. So actually, surely that's important as well.
I think the most important thing is the victims themselves. And we have been busy as a government this last year implementing the 200 or so recommendations of the previous inquiry. Convictions are now at a record high. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is always focused, whether it's on this or other issues, on what practical things can be done to make sure that justice is always delivered.
But you see, this has to be dealt with properly to make sure this doesn't happen in future. Presumably there are going to be some lessons learned here about the way ministers respond to these issues.
Well, the Prime Minister, when he was Director of Prosecutions, he brought the first convictions in Rochdale. Louise Casey, when she did her review in Rotherham, uncovered what was going on there. So I think the Prime Minister's got a good track record in this area. The first convictions, he, unlike the previous government, is implementing the recommendations of the J review. And now we will go further and have alongside these local inquiries and national inquiries. So we do learn lessons for the victims.
I'm only interrupting you because I want to get on to talk about your business, which is, of course, a spending review. Reversal of policy on the winter fuel allowance. You said all along that you wanted to protect the poorest, the most vulnerable. We understand that you now intend that 75% of pensioners are going to get the allowance. How do 3/4 of pensioners become the poorest and most vulnerable? Surely you've just given in to the noisy campaigners rather than focusing the money on those who really need it.
When we made the changes, we made the principal case that it should be a means-tested benefit, that we shouldn't be paying out winter fuel payment to better-off pensioners. Since then, we have made a decision now to increase it so that 75% of pensioners get it. And we've set that at £35,000, which is just below average earnings in this country. And it means when we looked at all the poverty impacts, no pensioner in poverty would be impacted by this. So that is the reason for the choice of £35,000.
Yeah, but this is a bit weird because you said that you want to focus on pensioner poverty. You set this at 35,000, which basically means pretty much everybody who is a pensioner gets it.
Well, 75% will, 25% won't. So that saves us around £450 million a year compared to what we inherited. So this is a big saving because we're no longer paying the winter fuel allowance.
Billion, I think, right?
Well, yes, that's what we'll be paying, but we're not going to be paying out £450 million. So for parties like the Tories and Reform who say it shouldn't be means-tested, they need to say where that £450 million difference would come from. So it's a principled case. The benefit should be means-tested. I don't think it is right that ordinary working people on low wages with costs of rent and mortgages and often childcare have to pay the winter fuel allowance for the wealthiest pensioners. Under our new rules, they won't be doing so.
Can I ask you, was it worth it going through all of this pain only to reverse yourself for whatever it is, not even a few hundred million?
Well, I mean, when I became Chancellor last year...
450 million, right?
When I became Chancellor last year, I faced a £22 billion black hole in the public finances. Over £6 billion of that because it was undisclosed asylum costs. And we had to get a grip of the situation. I was told when I became Chancellor that if we tried to issue those additional government bonds, the cost of borrowing would increase and we would find ourselves...
This was the threat of the run on the pound and all that.
There were very serious concerns at the Treasury and the Debt Management Office about the level of our borrowing and the additional borrowing that hadn't been disclosed to financial markets. So I had to take a very rapid decision.
But the fiscal position now is worse than then. I mean...
Well, no,
Why are you making
Trevor,
because
now everything is funded and costed, and the Office of Budget Responsibility say that we will be meeting our fiscal rules 2 years early, in 2 years' time, of both balancing day-to-day spending with tax receipts and also getting debt down as a share of GDP. We've dealt with that black hole. And so, look, I'm not immune to the pressures on public finances. Of course I'm not. That has involved a number of difficult decisions on tax, spending and welfare. We took those decisions in the budget last year to put our public finances on a firm footing, and we've now achieved that.
Look, we could talk about that all day long, but the most important thing I think that emerged from the spending review was that your two big priorities, billions on infrastructure, billions of money for the NHS. The plan that you've put out in the Blue Book says investment must come with reform. What are changes that you're going to demand of doctors and nurses in return for the 29 billion extra to the NHS?
Yeah. So look, the day after the spending review, I was in Derby at the local hospital there, and the chief executive said to me, "You've done your part. You've given us a settlement which we recognise was not easy to afford, and we now need to deliver against your plans to reduce hospital waiting times." And they were determined as a team to be able to achieve that. But one of the things that we're doing to help them achieve that is investment in new scanners, diagnostic equipment, and also ensuring that fewer wards are taken out of action because of the dilapidated condition of our hospitals. So as well as the day-to-day funding, we're also putting that capital investment so that we can use more of our hospital estate.
Can I just put one thing to you, which, I mean, I wish we had more time, but let's just deal with the underlying issue that you've got, which is one of productivity.
Yes.
The increase of funding right across public services is predicated on savings in the health service, something like 17 billion over 3 years.
Yes.
Now, this is productivity, as you can see, and the line I want to draw your attention to, public sector productivity has declined and continued to decline over the years. Now, you're giving the public sector money. I mean, it's an extraordinary, I think, shocking graft that. You're giving them a lot of money. What are you going to do to increase productivity? Because your plan and your fiscal rules depend on getting...
No, absolutely. So we did the first zero-based review in the spending review for 18 years last week. That means going through line by line what government is spending on. And the Department of Health, like every other department, identified 5% of their costs that they're going to take out of the system. That includes things like getting rid of NHS England, because that was...
It's not going to go into swallowed up by pay rises, as it was last year?
No, we are both years accepting the independent recommendations of the pay review bodies. And one of the reasons why we've managed to reduce the number of people on waiting lists by 250,000 in the first 10 months of this Labour government is because doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals have got back to work. And that is really crucial. We saw the data come in on Thursday morning that showed a further fall in the number on waiting lists. That's only been possible because of a combination of the investment we're putting in, but also the reform we're putting into the health service. And you saw in that chart a bit of a bounce back in NHS productivity, but we need to see more. Absolutely, we need to see more. And Wes Street and the Health Secretary is very focused on that.
Chancellor, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.